it does seem like SDR would actually be a mechanism consolidating the same underlying message of neocolonialism. But again, my question is, thinking about SDR, you would think about it from like an equity stake in a company. So as Africa, that's what we have at the IMF table. So there's going to be that difficult discussion in terms of what we bring on table and what we expect on the other end. So the feasibility of debate, for me, I actually think we should be thinking about the alternative financing mechanisms than spend a lot of debate on SDR and the potential realities.
When we're talking about special drawing rights, we cannot already forget the discussion we had this morning, and particularly the words of our keynote speaker, in the role that the IMF has had and continues to have in consolidating the current structure of dependence of the Global South in the context of the dynamics of globalization. So let's look with that at what special drawing rights actually have done. I mean, virtually you have, with a stroke of pen, developed countries literally inventing money largely for themselves, although some have certainly also benefited, particularly middle-income countries, but largely from themselves. Then, despite the ethos and the pathos of the crisis, this money has been rechanneled now to the IMF to give it increased loan power to run another round of structural adjustment programs, this time in the name of climate, pretending that this will help the Global South adjust to the climate challenge when the West hasn't done it itself. And then he will probably claim that this loan money will be the climate finance that the West hasn't been providing despite its historical responsibility. So I know that this may not make justice to some particularly middle-income countries that benefited from increased liquidity, but where do we stand as civil society, and particularly as African civil society? Do we really want more? I'm not sure.
Dealing with the issues brought by the COVID-19 pandemic, we were in need of nearly 400 and so much billion US dollar per year to address the challenges that we are facing. But now, an entire continent is concentrating on 33 billion. Because if you try to divide 33 per 55, you will see that nobody will be left with 1 billion US dollar. So why are we having this conversation? Because it has started, you know, with our leaders, and this is when we talk about leadership issues. Because no Asian country is engaged in this debate. Because if you look, you will see that they are speaking about other issues, not about concentrating on dividing, 33 billion into 55 people. So for me, and I do think that it is the feeling of everybody here, there is need for us to also embrace, a structural mindset change that will allow us as Africans to stand firm and to say that now we are engaging in a development process where we want things to change. Because if we concentrate on 33 billion and we are in need of more than 417 billion, and we are losing through illicit financial flows not less than 89 billion per year, it means that we have the money that is for the SDR. So why do we go to the IMF to go and beg that money? Because if you talk about this climate issue that he spoke about, we are now negotiating with Japanese. Just allow me to share that information with you. And they are trying to let us swallow the fact that we should engage in a net zero carbon emission, in the coming years to comply with the so-called Paris Agreement. But what people are not mindful of is, as Africa is aiming to transform and to grow, our carbon emission is also due to grow. So they are saying we need to transit from, carbon emission to a low carbon emission, or to decarbonization, or to green growth and everything. Who will do that? even people that are speaking about it are not even caring about that. They are now today trying to bring back the old ways of producing energy, and they are harnessing it without any other form of taking care about the rest of the world. So there is need for us to know that in this strategic game, Africa needs to stand firm and say, for the sake of our structural transformation, we also need to use, nuclear energy. We have that source in Africa, but unfortunately, people are coming to pump it here and go and use it for their own purposes. So there is need for us to understand that we sit in a very, 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 productive continent, a very, very rich continent. There is need for us to look at what we have in here to ensure that we are able to accelerate progress. Let's not concentrate on side discussions, because this SDR, I think, since the last 2 years, we have spent a lot of discussion on that. Even that SDR, that money, I'm not sure there is one African country that can tell you that they have used that money to develop something. So there is nothing to expect about it. So let's concentrate on structural transformation. Let's concentrate on agricultural production, because people are hungry. And as we say in economics, you cannot design a long-term program with hungry people, because their expectations are daily expectation. Their anticipation are daily anticipation. But what you need is structural anticipation of people that are able to project their views in the next 10 years, not people that are hungry, looking at meals. Sorry to be saying these things, but because I'm working for the African Union Commission, and I can tell you that when we go to negotiations, people are not happy when I'm there, because I will always speak this way. The discussion with Japanese can start at 10 a.m. in the morning, and we sleep at 3 a.m. because we are saying we don't want to understand, we don't want to accept anymore that this continent is not able to raise its voice despite all the challenges that we are facing. If you do think that you will continue laying down for people to work on you, you will never achieve anything. Just to finish, I know we are in a rule-based international system and also in a power-based system. Because if you look at things that are happening to us, it is about the rules are very, evolving with regards to the interest of people that are, projecting those rules. But the thing is, we need to adapt and to make sure that we are also able to become, not only rule takers, but rule makers in our continent.
We design and implement projects with winning the loan in mind. That's what drives the design of a project, for instance. It's about getting the money, but not actually designing projects that are sustainable, that will sustainably service that particular loan that you're taking. It's about getting that money, and we see that once we get that money, I'm yet to see projects that have been implemented within the set timelines. Sometimes once we get that money, or once we get that loan, we reallocate it to consumption, and that becomes a problem. And I agree with Patrick that we are in a power game. And in a power game, you don't just look at today. It is long term. And I agree that we might be flogging a dead horse when we're chasing the SDRs. But it's not just about the 33 billion. If we got that 3 trillion to meet our immediate needs, as we focus on sealing the loopholes that facilitate illicit financial flows, that's very important. And it's not that there are no resources in this world. Look at how much the US is spending on the Ukraine war. It's more than what was allocated at the moment. It's almost $1 trillion already. So the resources are there. And Africa, we're endowed with the resources. And I agree with Patrick when he talks about the issues of net zero. But we need to also ask ourselves, with what we are facing today, where do we need to invest those little resources that we have? Is it in the fossil fuels that is fueling this particular climate crisis, or is it in renewable energy that will power our development? And let's not be cheated, because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, we are seeing delegations and delegations coming to Africa to exploit our gas and signing deals. Are we going in the next 20, 30 years to be left with stranded assets as the rest of the world moves? So those are certain reflections that we need to ask ourselves as we strategize, as we understand and strategize in this particular power game. And let's look at it from a long-term perspective and not just today and responding to crisis after crisis. There will be another crisis tomorrow. So will it be about, will it just be about SDRs and SDRs? Where will the next health pandemic get us? It is insane that in this continent, when COVID-19 hit, a country had more vice presidents than the number of ventilators in that particular country. So where are our priorities as we talk about these issues? It's the leadership of the African continent. And it's not that we've not come together before. We came together, developed the Agenda 2063. We came together and developed an Africa common position when we were negotiating Agenda 2030. It's time that we come together and push the implementation of the Agenda 2063, push the reform or the disbandment of the international financial architecture.
This idea that somehow we are putting all our eggs in the SDR basket is false. Nobody's suggesting we should do that. However, we are at the African continent represents a huge number of countries, and within the forum of something like the UN, that's a bulk of voices that can make a difference. Mm-hmm. And from that particular perspective, we need to say, what all can we do? And certainly SDR is not the only or the most important thing. However, remember that SDRs arrive debt-free. The question was asked, when does interest accrue? And interest accrues when another country lends you their SDRs. Why? Because they have to, it is seen not as a gift. It's not a donation, it's a loan. And it is an interest that is repaid to the IMF. And so the country that's loaning you those SDRs will charge you interest. So this idea that somehow everything should rest on the SDR is wrong. However, it is almost the closest we get to helicopter money. And if it's possible to increase the share of it as a rightful claim by Africa, being the least of the countries in terms of climate destruction. And this is a mechanism by which the neocolonialists, of which we have spoken about many times today, could make a difference. I don't think we should reject it out of hand. The big issue, of course, that has been mentioned throughout is that the African voice needs to be organized. There is a real need for a real response to the common framework. It is only African countries that have so far been able to be eligible for the common framework, and there are 4 of them that are, and Mozambique is the only one that hasn't applied for it. But when we look at the response and the timing and how difficult it is for Zambia to actually cope, and the other countries to cope with the outcomes of it, it's uncertain. That is where we need to focus our energies, to say, how do we restructure this rule game, not only so that we can make the rules, but what rules would work for us, define that, and actually ensure that there's a position of strength rather than simply saying it's not working for us. I would really commend that there would be an energy that focuses on how that voice can be channeled and thought through carefully.
SDR allocation can work provided we have the requisite legal framework and policy frameworks around accountability and transparency to ensure that they're used put to proper use instead of being wasted.
For policies and practices that put people first. We call for policies and practices that put people first.